I never thought our quaint little town of Marlow could harbor such darkness. But then again, I never believed in monsters until I met one. They called him the Dollmaker, and the name still sends shivers down my spine. It all started on an overcast day in October, just a few weeks before Halloween. The first of the disappearances was a young girl named Lily Evans. She was only 8, with bright blonde hair and a smile that could light up the gloomiest of days. Her parents reported her missing after she failed to return home from school. The whole town mobilized to search for her, but it was as if she had vanished into thin air. I'm Sheriff Tom Reynolds, and I've been serving Marlow for over 20 years. I've seen my share of tragedy, but nothing prepared me for what was to come. After Lily went missing, more children started to disappear, 3 in just under a month. Each time, the circumstances were eerily similar. They were last seen playing outside, only to vanish without a trace. The real horror began when we found the first doll. It was a stormy night when I received a call from Mrs. O'Hara, an elderly woman who lived alone on the outskirts of town. Her voice trembled as she spoke, and I could hear the fear in every word. "Sheriff, you need to come to my house right away. There's something terrible on my porch." I drove through the pouring rain, my mind racing with possibilities. When I arrived, Mrs. O'Hara was standing at her front door, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. She pointed to a small wooden box sitting on her porch. I approached it cautiously, my hand hovering over my holster. Inside the box was a doll, but not just any doll. It was incredibly lifelike, with a face that looked eerily familiar. My blood ran cold as I realized why. It was a perfect replica of Lily Evans. The doll was dressed in a miniature version of the outfit Lily had been wearing the day she disappeared. Its eyes, glassy and haunting, seemed to follow me as I moved. As I lifted the doll out of the box, a piece of paper fell from its lap. I picked it up and read the message, scrawled in an elegant, almost playful script. "Do you like my work? There will be more to come. The Dollmaker." That night marked the beginning of a nightmare. The town was gripped by fear, parents refusing to let their children out of their sight. But despite our best efforts, more children continued to disappear, and more dolls were found, each one a perfect replica of the missing child. We set up patrols, searched every inch of Marlow, but the Dollmaker was always one step ahead. It was as if he could see our every move, predict our every action. The stress and frustration were taking their toll on me, and I could see it in the eyes of my deputies as well. One evening, I decided to visit the parents of the latest victim, a boy named Timmy Rogers. Timmy's father, Jack, was a good friend of mine. We had grown up together, and it broke my heart to see him in such pain. He and his wife, Karen, were inconsolable, their home filled with an unbearable sadness. "Tom, you have to find him," Jack pleaded, his voice cracking. "You have to bring our boy back." "I'm doing everything I can, Jack," I replied, though I felt the weight of my own helplessness. "We'll find him. Promise." As I left their house, I noticed something strange in their backyard. Amidst the toys and swings, there was a small, makeshift shed that I had never seen before. Curiosity got the better of me, and I walked over to take a closer look. The shed was old and weathered, with a rusty padlock keeping it shut. I could hear something inside, faint, almost inaudible, like the whisper of a breeze. I called for backup, not wanting to take any chances. When Deputy Miller arrived, we broke the lock and slowly opened the door. The sight that greeted us was horrifying. Inside the shed were more dolls, each one eerily lifelike and dressed in the clothes of the missing children. They were arranged in a macabre display, sitting in tiny chairs or standing in stiff, unnatural poses. My stomach churned as I realized these were the dolls that hadn't been delivered yet. In the corner of the shed, we found a small, blood-stained workbench. Tools were scattered across it. Scalpels, needles, thread. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The dollmaker wasn't just creating dolls. He was using the children themselves to make these grotesque figures. We searched the shed for any clues, and that's when we found the trapdoor. It was hidden beneath a pile of old rags, leading down into the darkness. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever lay below, and descended the rickety wooden stairs. The basement was cold and damp, with a sickly sweet smell that made my skin crawl. The walls were lined with shelves, each one filled with jars of something. I didn't want to think about what might be inside them. In the center of the room was a large table, covered in more tools and what looked like pieces of porcelain. And then I saw him. The dollmaker was standing at the far end of the room, his back to me. He was tall and thin, with long, spindly fingers that moved with an unsettling grace. He was working on another doll, humming a soft, tuneless melody. "Freeze! Put your hands where I can see them," I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. He turned slowly, and I finally saw his face. It was pale and gaunt, with eyes that seemed too large for his skull. There was an almost childlike innocence in his expression, which made the horror of his actions even more grotesque. "You shouldn't have come here, Sheriff," he said in a sing-song voice. "You're ruining my masterpiece." I kept my gun trained on him, but I couldn't help the wave of revulsion that washed over me. Why are you doing this?" He tilted his head, as if considering the question. "Because they're beautiful. They're perfect. My dolls are my children, and I love them dearly." "You're sick," I spat. "You're going to pay for what you've done." Before I could react, he lunged at me with a scalpel. I fired my gun, the shot ringing out in the confined space. The dollmaker crumpled to the ground, the scalpel clattering from his hand. I stood there, shaking, as the reality of what had just happened sunk in. We called for backup, and soon the basement was swarming with officers and paramedics. The surviving children were found in a hidden room, drugged but alive. As they were carried out, I felt a mixture of relief and guilt. We had found them, but we were too late to save the others. The investigation that followed uncovered the full extent of the dollmaker's madness. He had been living in Marlow for years, blending in as a quiet, unassuming resident. His real name was Thomas Duval, a failed artist who had turned to unspeakable methods to create his masterpieces. The town of Marlow would never be the same. The memories of the lost children haunted us all, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind even the most innocent of facades. I carried the weight of that knowledge with me, a constant reminder of the evil that men can do. Years later, I retired from the force, but the images of those dolls still haunt my dreams. I moved away from Marlow, hoping to leave the past behind, but some scars never truly heal. I spend my days in quiet solitude, trying to find peace in the simple things. One day, while walking through a small antique shop in my new town, I saw something that stopped me cold. In a dusty corner, among old toys and trinkets, was a doll. It was lifelike, with glassy eyes that seemed to follow me as I moved. It was dressed in the clothes of a child, and there was something eerily familiar about it. I asked the shopkeeper where it had come from, but he just shrugged. "Some old estate sale, I think. It's been here for years." I bought the doll and took it home, placing it on a shelf where I could see it. I didn't know why, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy it. Maybe it was a reminder, a way to never forget the darkness I had uncovered. Or maybe, deep down, I still feared that the dollmaker's work was not finished, and that his legacy lived on in ways I couldn't understand. As I sit here, staring at the doll, I can't help but wonder if there are others out there, waiting to be found. The dollmaker may be gone, but the darkness he embodied still lingers, a shadow over the world. And I know that as long as there are people who can see that darkness, there will always be those who fight to keep it at bay. But for now, all I can do is watch and wait, hoping that the monsters stay hidden and that the light can keep them at bay. Because I know that even in the brightest of places, the shadows can still hide the most terrifying of secrets.